Welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Khan. Topping your headlines, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his military to begin withdrawing the main part of its forces from Syria, saying that Russian military intervention had largely achieved its objectives. A video surfacing online sparks a criminal investigation involving Kellogg. The video, which we won't be airing, shows a man urinating onto a conveyor belt used by one of Kellogg's factory assembly lines. March Madness is officially in full swing. It kicked off a bit of a headache for the NCAA and CBS Sports when the official playoff teams were leaked online ahead of the official announcement. General Motors returns to court for a new trial over a faulty ignition switch. The previous trial ended prematurely when the jury was dismissed after questions arose about the plaintiff's truthfulness. Guinness World Record has confirmed that 112-year-old Israel Crystal is the world's oldest man. He has lived through both world wars and survived the Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz.
Man, would love to have a conversation with that gentleman. Let's talk more about the Ohio primary tomorrow. According to an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, with Marist as well, came out yesterday, John Kasich is beating Donald Trump by about 6 points. Ted Cruz is in second place with 19%. Marco Rubio in third place with just 6% of the vote, fourth place rather. But there's also this Quinnipiac poll out today that shows Donald Trump and John Kasich tied at 38% each. It's a great place to bring in our roundtable.
That it is, John. Joining us today, we have Pete Seat, former White House spokesperson for President George W. Bush, and Franco Ripple, Democratic media strategist. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on this Monday. Pete, who do you think is going to win Ohio tomorrow?
Well, I think John Kasich will end up pulling out in Ohio, but Donald Trump is showing us how important this state is to him by canceling events in Florida and shifting resources and his time. The greatest resource he has is his time into Ohio. And, you know, it's funny to me because it seems like it always comes down to Ohio and Florida, right, in the general election. And here it is in the primary, the Republican primary. It's really coming down to Ohio and Florida. And who wins those states will determine whether or not Donald Trump can get the delegates he needs to win on the first ballot.
Franco, do you think Donald Trump made a wise move by canceling a few rallies here so he could spend more time in Ohio land?
I do. I mean, because really what this comes down to, as Pete said, is that Ohio is a must-win state for Donald Trump, which seems funny because he is the front runner after all, right? But the strategy has now shifted from not trying to win necessarily for the other candidates, but just trying to stop Donald Trump from getting the 1,237 delegates needed to be the nominee. And so a Kasich win actually will probably send Donald Trump on the path that he's on into the convention actually short of the 1,237. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Franco. If Donald Trump wins both Ohio and Florida tomorrow, he's going to get to 1,237. That's not a definite, but I do believe he will. Now, if he loses either one, and it looks like he could lose Ohio, he's not going to get to 1,237. It's still mathematically possible, but it's going to be very difficult. The other challenge for Donald Trump with losing Ohio is that the Republican nominee must win Ohio in the general election. So if you have the guy who could still eventually go on to become the nominee if he loses Ohio, I don't think it's going to happen, but if that's the case, he is vulnerable in a state that Republicans absolutely must win. But Pete, I want you to expand a little bit more about John Kasich. What does it mean for his campaign, they're trying so hard to get this to a contested convention? If he can hold up Ohio and say, I won this state and Republicans have to win this state, I got a 60% approval rating, I can beat Hillary Clinton, what does that do for his campaign? Does it provide some legitimacy?
I think it provides some legitimacy, and if we get to a convention floor fight, he may have a message that he can spread to the delegates to say, hey, I can do this, I'm reasonable, and I can actually win the general. But he hasn't been that successful to this point, and it will be his home state will be the first one that he actually puts on the board. So while it's good for the, quote, never Trump people who are trying to stop Donald Trump, I don't think it will be a huge day for John Kasich to win in his own backyard.
Franco, what do you think?
Well, yeah, so as Pete just said, how big of a deal is it for Kasich to win in his own backyard? I don't know, maybe we should ask Marco Rubio how big of a deal it's going to be to lose by potentially 15, 20 points in his backyard. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Florida and Ohio are the states tomorrow that have to be won by non-Trump candidates in order to stop Trump from being on this glide path to the nomination. I think Kasich is well positioned to do so. And, you know, I think all you have to do is look at, unfortunately for Marco Rubio, look at the rally he had in his hometown over this past weekend, where they couldn't practically get enough people to fill the end zone.
Right.
You compare that to, he also had an event at an airplane hangar in Sarasota. He had a couple hundred people. The campaign said 500 showed up, which, as we all know, campaigns estimate generously. Donald Trump filled it with 10,000 a few weeks ago. So
not even close.
The only thing missing was a "please clap" line from Rubio to complete the sadness factor.
Thank goodness he didn't go there. But Pete, he did tell a lot of his supporters to vote for Kasich in Ohio, which I thought was kind of an unusual move. We talked about this last week. Have you seen candidates do this before?
Not that I can think of, maybe privately, but to overtly make that case to voters and say, hey, this is what we need to do. This is, to the point made earlier, it's not about winning, it's about stopping. It's about stopping Donald Trump. And in some respects, these candidates are joining forces to make sure that he does not have those delegates before we get to Cleveland, because the Republican Party needs to win the White House. And there has been no indication to this point that Donald Trump is going to get anywhere close to winning it. He will hand the keys to Hillary Clinton. So stopping him is critical.
Yeah, you can just see already the headlines if he does go, in fact, to lose Ohio. There is everyone in the mainstream media, Trump, the people in the Never Trump movement, Stop Trump, all those folks are going to latch on to this and hold it out as an example of why Donald Trump cannot be the GOP nominee. That's why I think Ohio is so critical, and there's a disproportionate relationship between the expectations to win versus the expectations to lose. Everybody thinks Marco Rubio is going to lose Florida and Donald Trump is going to win Florida, so they're kind of writing that off. But if Donald Trump loses Ohio, where the expectations are much different, I think that might put a bigger chink in his armor, or provide the opportunity, at least, for a lot of Republicans who don't like the idea of Donald Trump to really use that as an example as to why he cannot win.
Plus, you brought up earlier about President Obama's approval ratings going up, and generally when that happens, when they're up over, 50%, generally that means that a Democrat is going to be the next in office.
Well, the odds are much better for the
party,
incumbent from your party to take over the White House.
But we have
again.
been wrong about Donald Trump this entire time.
Who knows what's going to happen?
So,
That's the thing.
I mean, right, Franco? I mean, everybody, Republicans, Democrats, pundits, I mean, didn't think this man could make it this far. So who's to say?
Listen, I'll be the first to say, you know, this time a year ago or in the summer, I'm pretty sure I said something like Donald Trump will not be the nominee. He is not a candidate for president. And I still stand by half of that. He's not a candidate for president. He's a candidate for, you know, supreme leader of Trumpistan. I don't know. Like he's doing this, I think, for himself. And we can get into this, you know, into that another time. But he's proven clearly that he's connecting. To me, the scary part is that he's connecting with whom? A slice of the Republican primary electorate that's willing to listen to him and to follow him at any cost.
Franco, Pete, stick around. We still have much more to talk about here on Newsmax Now. Coming up next.
On Friday, Ben Carson endorsed Donald Trump for president, saying he has the vision and energy to win. Because nobody knows more about vision and energy than the guy who looks like he just got hit with a tranquilizer dart.
Welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. Will Bernie Sanders be able to pull off another upset over Hillary Clinton in Ohio? Well, according to the latest Quinnipiac poll, Clinton is ahead of Sanders in the Buckeye State by about 6 points. Kind of tight there. Sanders says the nation's trade deals have led to the end of thousands of factories, killed millions of jobs, and reduced wages for workers. Now, during the Democratic town hall last night, Sanders pointed out the differences between himself and Hillary Clinton. Take a listen.
You are looking at a senator and a former congressman who opposed every one of these disastrous trade agreements which have cost American workers millions of jobs.
What kind of agreements? Well, Sanders says Clinton backed the North American Free Trade Agreement back in the 1990s and claims that she flip-flopped on the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. And that's where we want to welcome back today's Roundtable.
For joining us for part 2 of the Roundtable, we have Pete Seat, former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush, and Franco Ripple, Democratic media strategist. Gentlemen, thanks for sticking around.
You got it.
All right, Pete, we talked about how critical Ohio is for the Republican frontrunner, but Franco, I also want to talk about how important it is for Hillary Clinton, especially after the Sanders miracle that we saw play out in Michigan. We heard Sanders talking about jobs and the trade deals, and what we are looking at is the Rust Belt here. And all those jobs, a lot of the jobs that have been lost are in this part of the country, in the Midwest. What happens if Bernie Sanders pulls off another upset and defeats Hillary Clinton in Ohio?
Well, I'm not sure how big of upsets these actually are. I mean, Franco,
let me stop you there again. We're talking about the front runner from the Democratic Party losing in the primary in the state of Ohio. So you have the narrative out there, just like you would have Donald Trump if he lost. This person cannot win the state of Ohio. They couldn't do it in their own race. They're not going to be able to do it against the Republican nominee, no matter who that is. I think this would be a pretty big deal. I know she's your girl, but don't downplay it.
Well, listen, you notice I didn't say anything when we were talking about Donald Trump losing in an intra-party primary in Ohio, because much the same way here, you're talking about Democrats voting for Democrats and Republicans voting for Republicans. And so what this would be saying is perhaps the voters of that state are looking for a slightly different vision out of their Democratic nominee than from the other candidate. And so I think when you look at states like Michigan and Ohio that are in the Rust Belt, maybe they haven't felt as much of the economic recovery as some other states in the nation. And so they're maybe a little bit angrier about it, and they're looking to someone who's going to take out that frustration on trade pacts. And Bernie Sanders, I really think, is unfortunately very willing to take out some aggression on these trade pacts, when the reality is we do live in a globalized world, and American workers need to be given every resource possible to be able to train up for 21st century jobs, whether it's in clean energy and technology or the new century's manufacturing jobs. And I think
but they're not. And Pete, let's go ahead and bring you in here, because what this would speak to is the populism that is running through this campaign. And if Donald Trump is running against Hillary Clinton, and again, if she has lost Ohio, let's assume that Donald Trump becomes the nominee, that populism will work in his favor. It won't work in her favor. And that's what would be the result if we see a Bernie Sanders win in Ohio. Do you agree?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders has already won the message war, and Saturday Night Live did a brilliant job this weekend.
Yes, we got that coming up. People stick around.
That's a good tease, though, Pete.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll leave it at that. But they've done a brilliant job showing that. But here's the thing. Hillary is going to benefit from the fact that Ohio, unlike on the Republican side where it's winner take all, it's proportional delegates. So even if she loses to Bernie Sanders tomorrow, she's still probably going to get a really good chunk of the delegates, because she's got some of the urban core centers. She's got support from the African-American community. She'll do okay. Where Bernie has got some help is, of course, with blue-collar white males, especially in some of these industrial parts of the state, just like he did in Michigan. He got a victory in a judge allowing 17-year-olds to vote. Hopefully, they'll actually come out in support of him, while some of their older brethren are actually out on spring break and won't be able to vote. So it's really a toss-up on what's going to happen. But Hillary has struggled outside of the South so far, and Bernie really does have some Michigan momentum. You called it the miracle in Michigan. He's got that momentum that he's trying to parlay just south of the Michigan border.
Yeah, but guys, let me say this. It's not that simple to say that, let's say if Hillary Clinton loses Ohio and Donald Trump manages to win it, that absolutely means that in a general election, Republican versus Democrat, that means that he's going to carry the state.
That's not what I'm saying, Franco, but I am saying it's going to send us a signal about how strong, and I think Michigan sent us a symbol too, about how strong the populism is. And that populism crosses the partisan divide. And we've seen that in this campaign. One of the things that makes it very, very different from campaigns in the past. These people are angry, and they want somebody who's listening to them, or thinks they're listening to them anyway.
I'm listening. We're all listening. We're listening to you, John. Don't be angry anymore. It's going to be all right.
I'm not. I'm
It's
calming
okay,
down.
all
Gentlemen,
right.
thanks for being with us today. Great to speak with both of you.
Same.
All right,
Thank you.
Franco Ripple and Pete C. joining us here on Newsmax.
And coming up next on Newsmax Now, we want to hear from you. Are you angry? What do you think about the Breitbart reporter resigning after she accused Trump's campaign manager of assaulting her? Tweet us your thoughts at Newsmax Now, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook page. We'll air some of your comments a little bit later after the break. Or maybe, what do you think about what John said? I want to know that. Do you agree with what John Bachman said? Does it send a message if Trump wins by a lot and Hillary doesn't?